Well, today's daf yomi is Menachos daf Yud Daled, and we're going to start on the bottom of Yud Gimel and Beis, on the bottom of 13b, where our Mishnah says, "Shachat shnei kvathim." So we're continuing our discussion of Pegel, and our Mishnah says that let's say a person slaughters the two sheep that are brought as a korban on Shavuot as a communal shlamim, and they come together with the two loaves of bread, which allow the wheat offerings to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash. So they are both Kodesh, and they allow the two loaves of bread to be eaten by the Kohanim. And at the moment of the Shlita, he has the wrong thought. He has a thought, Le'echol achas menachalos or machar. He has a thought to eat one of these two loaves of bread the next day, or Hiktir Shnei Bezikin, or let's say he does the Haktar of the two Bezikin, Boker Tov, on the bottom of Yud Gimel on the base at the Mishnah, or let's say he does the two Bezikin, he does the Haktara of the two incense, the two Lavona, that the Bezikin are on the they are on the two trays. One is on each of the columns of the lechem apanim. So together they allow the lechem apanim to be eaten, the bread that's eaten every Shabbos, and he has in mind to eat one of the breads beyond the proper time. In case you haven't figured out, we're discussing pigol again, which is our favorite topic from Zivachim. So I hope you have heat in your house, Jeff. It looks very cold there. Do you have heat? If you don't have heat, let me know. I can't hear you, but I assume you have heat because otherwise,
Yes, no,
you.
I'm upstairs and it's cold.
I got you. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer, under those circumstances, oso hachala, but oso aseder shachishev of pigol v'chayiv and of kares. Rabbi Yossi says that that challah, that one of those lechem apanim that he thought about, and also that column of the bread, that column alone is pigul, just that column, and you're liable for kares if you eat that. Sheni pasal the imo kares. The second one is disqualified, but there's no kares. Meaning to say, you could split the pigul. Now, it doesn't go on the entire offering; it just goes on part of it. The Chachamim say no. The pigul, if you have a pigul thought on half of it, the entire thing becomes pigul. The entire thing becomes pigul. That's what the Chachamim say. So the Gemara is going to have two explanations of this. First, Rav Huna, and then Rabbi Yochanan on top of Yudalit on the base. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Omer Haya Rabbi Yosei. So now Rav Huna says, now he wants to explain what's the reason why Rabbi Yossi says, or in the bottom of Yud Gimel on the base, what's the reason why Rabbi Yossi says that the pigul does not fall on the entire element? It doesn't go on both loaves of bread, and it doesn't go on both columns of bread. So Rav Huna says Rabbi Yossi was of the position pigul b'yerach shel yamin, lunis pagol yerach shel shmol. Rabbi Yossi is even on the opinion, let's say you have in mind to eat the right thigh beyond the proper time, then the left thigh is not pigul. So if you eat it, you're not liable for kares. It's still puzzle, but that's rabbinic. And you're not liable for kares. My taima. What's the reasoning? Says Rav Huna. Ibayasem masvara, ibayasem makra. We could say that it's logic, or we could say a verse. Ibayasem masvara. So you could say it's logical. What's the logic? The logic would be lo adifa machshava mimaisa, because thought is not stronger than action. Let's say you have a circumstance where the meat became disconnected, it's not connected, and one of the limbs became tamei. Would all of the limbs become tamei? No, that for sure wouldn't be the case. And so too, so if you have a machshava of pigul, if you have a thought on pigul on part of it, since it's not connected, since they're all parts that are not connected, therefore it's not a machshava on all of it. We buy say makra, or else you could say it's based upon a verse. It says in the pasuk with respect to a carbon that you have machshava pigol in Parashat Tzav, the one who eats from it will carry his sin. Meaning to say, mimenu, only if you eat from it and not from your friend. So the Gemara is going to spend the rest of Amud Aleph of Yudaleh, which we haven't got up to yet, questioning Rav Huna's logic, and then on the top of Yudaleh Amud Beis, Rabbi Yochanan's position is going to be explaining Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara first challenges Rav Huna from Rav Nachman. Eisvein Rav Nachman Rav Huna. What about the Chachamim's position is we have a brisa that says with respect to this 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos and the 2 sheep on Shavuos at the Shalmei Tzibor and the 2 loaves of bread, Olam aim bo kares. You're not going to get kares if you eat those 2 loaves of bread when you had a thought of pig on them. Ad sheyafagel b'shteim b'kazayis, until you have a thought to make them piggle, to eat kazayis from both of them together. And then the 2 loaves of bread are going to become piggle and you're liable for kares. Doesn't that prove b'shtein in both of them, he's going to be liable for piggle, but ba'achas mi'en, but with one of them, if you just had a thought on one of them, it would not be piggle. Hold on. So, but if you just had a thought of one of them, it would not be piggle. Now, money, whose position is the position of this price, which says if you just have a thought on one of them, it's not piggle. If it's the position of the Rabbanan, if he says you just had a thought to eat one of the loaves of bread, it's not piggle. It can't be the Rabbanan. I feel ba'achas man nami. Even if you only had a thought on one of them, the second one is piggle, as the position of the Rabbanan is clear. Ela Pshita must be clear that this brisa follows the position of Rabbi Yossi. And so it's now Iamris Bishlama Chad Gufahu. If you want to say that the thigh, if you have a thought about the right thigh and the left thigh, that the other one is piggle because they're one carbon, then it explains the brisa with respect to the 2 loaves of bread. That even if we say they're 2 separate entities, nevertheless, if you intend to eat them together, mishum hachim mitzdarif. And so that's why they combine to like one entity. It's as though you thought of them completely. But Eli Amr's Trey Gufininu, if you want to say with respect to the right thigh and the left thigh, that even though they come from one thigh, there's still 2 bodies. And so therefore, if you have a thought on one of them, the second one is not piggle, mi mitzdarfi. Could you say that the 2 loaves of the bread are going to combine to make a kazayas? It's not the case. They can't combine. It's 2 separate bodies. And so therefore, if one of them became piggle, the other one wouldn't. So it must be the Rabbi Yossi admits that by the right thigh and the left thigh, that they're one body. And if you had a piggle on one of them, also the other one is piggle. And so therefore, the machshava can also combine 2 loaves of bread, and not the way Rav Huna explained it. So the Gemara says, no, you can't prove this brisa is not like Rabbi Yossi, because you could say that really, according to Rabbi Yossi, like Rav Huna said, that if you have a piggle on the right thigh, the left thigh is not piggle. And also, according to him, the 2 loaves of bread cannot combine to make the kazayas. And the question of Rav Nachman, who is the author of our brisa? Money. This is the position of Rabbi, a third position. And the question of the brisa is not when both loaves become piggle and one loaf becomes piggle, but the only issue is if 2 different avodos can combine to make a kazayas. That's what Rebbe is referring to. Totally different question. The Tanya shochet as a keves. Let's say somebody slaughters a sheep, and his intent was to eat a half of an olive size from this loaf. And also he slaughters the second sheep, and when he slaughters the second sheep, it was to eat also a half olive from the second challah. Rabbi says, is a phrase that's connected to Rabbi. He says, Omer ani shezeh kosher. I say the carbon is kosher, because he only had a half a thought on each one of the loaves, a thought on each of a half of an olive on each end of the one. And so since he only had Chati Zayis with Chatzi Matir, because each sheep is the Matir, but it's a half a Matir. Taima, what's the reason that Rebbe says it's okay there, the Amar Chatzi V'Chatzi? Because he said when he slaughters the sheep, he had on one half of it and also on the other one half of all Amar Kizayas Mishtein. But if and when he slaughtered the two sheep, he said he's going to eat from one of them. He said when he said slaughters the two sheep, he says he's going to eat Kizayas Mishtein, olive size amount from both of them. It's obviously going to be combining for Kizayas Mitzdarif because there he had the intent with to combine it together. And then it will be pigul. And so that's like the Brisa says that through his thought, he can combine two halves of an olive from two different loaves of bread. And so therefore the Brisa is like Rebbe. So the Gemara says, Rebbe aliba deman. So Rebbe, who is he holding like? Is he holding like the Rabbanon or Rebbe Yossi? Aliba de Rabbanon. If you want to say it's like the Rabbanon, afilu ba'achas meinam. He doesn't have to eat from both loaves of bread. Only from one of them, if he had a kazayas, would be sufficient. Aliba de Rebbe Yossi. And if it's going according to Rebbe Yossi, who says that the second one is not pigul unless you had the machshav on it explicitly. Hadron kushil duchta. The question has returned because we know that this proves that according to Rabbi Yossi, if you did a pigul on the right side, the left eye is disqualified because you can combine the two elements. So the Gemara says no. Rabbi is going according to the Rabbanan. Olam aliba the Rabbanan, and we say don't say until he has the pigul on both of the loaves of bread. Meaning to say it's not on the loaves of bread, but it's on the sheep that he has to have the two loaves, the machshav on the two sheeps. But when he had the improper thought on both of the matirim, then even on one of the loaves of bread, it's going to cause pigul. Rabbi Meir, this excludes the position of Rabbi Meir, who we'll get to, God willing, in 2 days. Can't wait. Rabbi Meir's position is that even if you had the improper thought on both on just one of the sheep, it's going to make a pigul. Because according to Meir, you can be mefagel on half the matir. So the Gemara says, "Kamashal on the law that the Rabbana do not say like that." So the Gemara says, "Well, if that's the case, if this price is only coming to tell us it's not like Rabbi Meir, why does say he's not? Why does he use the language of la'olam that always he's not liable? La'olam eno chayev." Why does he use that language of la'olam, which implies that the price is going to exclude something? No, if it's saying if he's coming to say you're only liable for karet if you had with on both of the loaves of bread with both of the sheep, the Rabbi Yossi he and it's Rabbi Yossi and it's coming to exclude the position of the Rabban and the Rabbi Meir. That's why it makes sense to say the language of la'olam. He said because he's excluding two things. He's saying one is a case where you only have pigul thought on one sheep, and one is where you have a pigul thought only on one loaf. Eli Amres Rabbanon. But if you want to say this price is not like Rabbi Yossi, but it's like the Rabbanon, that if you have pigul thought on one of them, both of them are pagul. Or afukimi the Rabbi Meir. My la'olam. Why does he? If it's Rabbanon, why does he use the language of la'olam? Va'od, and furthermore, I'll give you a further proof that Rabbi Yossi admits that if you have a pigul on the right thigh, the second thigh will become pigul. I'll further prove it to you. So another question to Rafuna, another challenge to Rafuna. I'll give you a proof. I'll give you a proof from the fact that we learned in. Hold on 1 second. I'll give you a proof from that which we learned with respect to the pigul of the bull and the goat that are burned. That you're supposed to be mazah, that you're supposed to sprinkle some of their blood on the parochas inside the Kodesh Kodashim, and then, inside the sanctuary, and then burn their emurim on the altar outside. And Rebbe Elazar says, Mishum Rebbe Yossi, Pigol b'davar nasa b'chutz. Let's say you did the pigol thought in the courtyard, which is outside the sanctuary, meaning to say that the machshavas pigol was at the time of the avoda that was done in the courtyard, and he thought to do something in the courtyard, then it's pigol. But bedavar nasa b'fnim. But if he had the thought on something to be done inside, lo pigol. And what's the case? Kate said, "Hayomei b'chutz." Let's say he's standing in the courtyard and he slaughters the bull or the goat. V'amar hareini shochet almanas lahazos midamo l'machar. He says, "I'm slaughtering it with the intent to sprinkle some of the blood in the paroches tomorrow." Lo pigol. It's not pigol. Shemachshava b'chutz. Bedavar not to befnim, because he has a thought while he's in the courtyard about something inside. And so too, Hayome bifnim and Amar Reini Maza Manasa after a moral macher. So too, if he's standing inside the sanctuary and he says, "I sprinkle the blood with the intent to offer the limbs the next day," or Lishboch Hashirayim Macher, or Pigo, it's also, or to pour the shirayim the next day, it's not pigol. Because it's about something that's not related to it, because he has a machshava inside on something that's done outside. But if it be but if he's standing outside, he says, "I'm doing it with the intent to pour the shirayim the next day," or then it would be pigol. Because that's a machshava outside on something that's done outside. So Rav Ashi explains the question. Now, lishboch shirayim, if his machshava is to pour the shirayim, that's pigol. Lifagu emai. What degree do we say it's pigol? Meaning to say, what will become pigol on the carbon? That if he'll eat it, it'll be chayav kares. If guay dam, if we're going to say it's to make the blood, that if he'll eat from the blood, he'll be liable for kares. He'll be chayav for pigol. That can't be dam mifagel, because there is no pigol on dam. Tanam eud varim she'en chayav and olem mishum pigol, and we say these are the things that you're not liable for a pigol. The law of pigol only applies when there's another matir for it, i.e., on the altar or the animal, and so therefore. And these are the things: the kometz, the lavona, the ketores, u'minchas kohanu, u'minchas nesachim, u'minchas kohen mashiach, v'adam, and the blood of these karbonos. That if you had a pigol thought when you did the avoda to eat the meat beyond the proper time, but the blood itself will not become pigol because there is no other matir, but it itself is the matir, and so therefore the blood itself will not become the pigol. El pshita, so it must be left gulei basar. So it must be to say that the meat will become pigol, and this is the proof. Well, hashta ma hasam, in that case of the brisa, that you're slaughtering the meat to sprinkle the shirayim the next day. The lo chashavei bebatzar gufei, that he didn't have that thought about the meat itself. And Amar Rabbi Yossi mifagel, and still Rabbi Yossi says it is mifagel. Hacha the chashavei bezevach gufei, but here where he's thinking about the animal itself, about the right thigh on the left thigh, he's thinking about the right thigh. Well, kol shekain the pigol b'yerach yamin, pigol b'yerach. For sure that the connection between the right thigh and the left thigh will be pigol. And furthermore, the Gemara says, "I'll give you a third proof." Now, like Rav Huna. Again, what did Rav Huna say? Rav Huna says, Rav Yossi says that if you had a pigol on the yerach yamin, on the right thigh, then the left thigh is not pigol. And we've already asked two questions on it, and now I'll say a third question. The third question comes from a Mishnah that we already had. You did the kamitz on the mincha to eat from the shirayim or to do the aktar the next day. Modi Rabbi Yosef said, this was yesterday's daf. Rabbi Yosef would admit shepigo v'chayav and olav kares, that it is pigo and you're liable for kares. So the Gemara now, Ravina now emphasizes the question. So he says, when he says if your intent was to bring the offering of the kometz the next day, it's pigo, lafgule mai. What will become pigo? If you want to say that the kometz itself becomes pigo, it can't be. Why? Kometz mi mifagel. The kometz itself cannot become pigol. Vatanan eud vam she'ein chayav and mishum pigol. This is something that you cannot become pigol for, which is eating the comments. El pshute lifgui shirayim. It's to make the shirayim pigol. Now again, the same question. Hashem ma hasam nelo chashavu b'shirayim gufe. He didn't even have a thought about the shirayim itself. But mipagle, but the shirayim are becoming pigol on top of your dawud on the base. Hacha the chashavu b'zvicha. Here he had the thought about the carbon itself. So hacha the chashavu b'zvicha gufe lo kol shekain. For sure, where he has the thought about the carbon itself, for sure. Ela Rabbi Yochanan, so here Rabbi Yochanan says, it must be, Rabbi Yochanan says a different explanation for Rabbi Yossi's position. Again, what was Rabbi Yossi's position, which we started off our daf, and that if you had a pigol on one challah, the other challah is not going to be pigol if you eat it. So it says Rabbi Yochanan, Hacha taima de Rabbi Yossi. This is the reason of Rabbi Yossi. Akos of asan guf echad, akos of asan shnei gufim. It's based upon the pasuk. The pasuk sometimes refers to the two chalos of Shavuos as one entity, and sometimes refers to them as two entities. Guf echad de ma'akman hadadi. They're one entity. That each one is essential. Now, the one challah is not kosher without the other one, because it says in the pasuk, "Mimosh v'osechem." And also, Shnei Ksuvin, why does it sometimes call them two? The Amrachmana, the Halachuda there and the Halachuda there. That basically, the Halachuda Vida, the Halachuda Vida, that each one needs to be done and arranged by itself. Arvinu, and if you mix them together, Miss Arvin, and they're combined. The Akos of Asan Guf Echad, because the Pasuk makes them one. Upalginu miflig. So basically, it's based upon the verse that, according to Rabbi Yossi, they're sometimes called two elements, and so therefore you're only liable for pigol on one of them. So now, once we have this explanation, so we want to know if Rabbi Yossi says this law only by the two loaves of bread on Shavuos, and what about and the lechem apanim? Is that where Rabbi Yossi says this law, and we argues with the Chachamim? Or is there also an argument by other elements? By Rabbi Yochanan, Pigel Balach Metoda. What do they argue about the 40 loaves of bread about the lechem of the Thanksgiving offering, which comes from 4 different types? So if you have the pigel thought on one of them, is it also pigel on the other ones? And also b'minchas mafeh. What about the mincha that's baked in the oven, which is 10 loaves of bread, and he could bring them from either 2 types, either rikikin or chalos. And according to Rabbi Shimon, you could bring half from one type and half from the other, is mal. So would they also argue there? So Tanile Rav Tachlifa Mima'arava V'chena Tomer Balach Metoda V'chena Tomer B'Milchas Mafeh. So yeah, the dispute according to Rav Tachlifa from Ma'arava is disputed by both of them. So now Gemara wants to know if 2 loaves, if 2 machshavos of pigol can combine by 2 different avodas. Tana Rabbanan. When he does the shchita, he has in mind to eat half of an ounce size of the meat the next day. And when he does the zrika, he also has in mind to eat half of an ounce size. That's pigol. That's going to become pigol because we're going to say mimnei shchita zrika mitzdarfin. The slaughtering and the sprinkling are combining. Now, ikada amri shchita zrika ditravayu. Matirin. So one approach is to say this only works by shchita and zrika because both of them are matirin. The shchita allows the blood to be sprinkled, and the sprinkling allows the blood to be in. But kabbalah and halacha, the conveying, the receiving the blood and the conveying are not, because neither one is a matirin. Or alternatively, hanach kamerachakin. These are so far away. The shchita is the farthest away from the sprinkling. So, and if they could combine kol shekain. For sure, the others can combine, which are closer. Gemara says, is it really the case, Aini, that the machshava by 2 avodos can be mitzdarf to kazayis? But Tani Levi, arba avodos, a mitzdarfos, arba avodos, there are 4 avodos, and a mitzdarfos will pigol, and they do not combine to make a pigol. And what are they? Shlita, zrika, kabbalah, and halacha. So it says explicitly in the Brisa that they don't combine. So therefore, how could we say in the different prices that they do combine? So he says, yeah, it's two different prices. Look, Kasha, har Rebbe, har Rabbanan. One is Rebbe, one's Rabbanan. The Tanya, Hashochet is a kevas lachol chatzi zayis michal hazu v'chein chavero lachol chatzi zayis michal hazu. Rabbi Omer Ani shevzeh kosher. Rabbi says it's not pigel. Amar Abaya, yeah, but that's not the same case. Amir Deshamasle Rabbi Meir that maybe Rabbi Meir says this Chatzi Matir the Chatzi Achila, where each one there has a half a Matir and on half of the eating, but Kul Matir the Chatzi Achila Mishamasle. But if he has a whole idea where on a complete Matir on half of the eating, what he said, Amoy Rabbi Barav Chanan Labayev, Israel Rabbi Kul Matir Chatzi Achila, if your Rebbe would admit that if be entirely matir and half of achila that's pigul, then ligzor chatzi matir v'chatzi achila, then anyway you should make a decree also on a half of matir and half of an achila. Atukul matir v'chatzi achila. So, but he doesn't make that decree. But we know that Rabbi Yossi does. The Rabbi Yossi Gazar. The Rabbanan Gazer, we know that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbanan both make a decree when they hold something similar. Rabbi Yossi Gazer did Rabbi Yossi says possible vein course. If you have your intent to burn the levona the next day, Rabbi Yossi says it's possible no kores. So so we see that he says it's possible. So Rabbi Yossi makes a decree there, and also Rabbanan Nami Gazer did Tanan. Pigo b'komets v'lo b'lavona. Now let's say do a pigo on the komets and not the lavona, or b'lavona and not the komets. Meir omer pigo chayav l'karis chum omer ein b'karis achiv vaga b'kol matir. And the Chum says there's no kares unless you do the pigo on the entire matir, but that implies there's only no kares. But they are admitting that the carbon is possible, and the reason is because they make the decree on the half matir because of a matir sham. So we see that according to this, Rebbe would have made a decree if he really held that. So Amrlay, so Abai says back to Rabbi Bar Rav Chanan, they're not the same thing. Bishlam Hasam in that case, because the Rebbe Yossi komets to Lavona to komets to Mincha. There, Rabbi Yossi makes a decree on the komets to Lavona because you might come to do komets to Mincha. The Rabbanan made the decree Gazri komets the Gazri komets to komets to Minchas Chote. Ulavona atu lavona babishne zikin. So bezikin. So there is something similar, but ukvasim nami keves atu keves chaver. They make a decree for something similar, but and also by the bezikin atu bezachaveru elahacha. But in our case, to do from a decree from the shchita to the zrika, vika chatzi matir v'chatzi achila ba'alma. The lekam will. Is there another case which is similar to this that we can make that decree? The Gemara says, yes, there is. And the Gemara says, excuse me, the Gemara supports this approach and saying that in fact there's nothing similar, and that's why the Rabbanan don't make a decree. That the reason why the Rabbanan made a decree to disqualify is because we find pigul on something similar. The Katani Seifa, with respect to the Rabbanan who argue with Rabbi Meir, with respect to Pigo and Chati Matir, they say, Modim Chacham Rabbi Meir, Minchas Chote, Minchas Kenos. The Rabbanan admit to Rabbi Meir by the Mincha of the sinner and the Mincha of the Kenos. Shem Pigo B'Komets, that if you did a Pigo on the Komets, a Pigo. B'Chayav al Karetz. She'akomets to a Matir, because the Komets is a Matir. How Lama will miss the Klapa? Why do they have to say this? Pshita, it's obvious. Mika Matir Achrina. There is obviously no other Matir. Of course, it's a complete Matir. It's obviously Pigo. When it's teaching us the time of the komets, that the reason why the chum is disqualified by komets because if they have a matir is mishamdika komets minchaschote the damila because of that case. So their case it's similar, so they make the decree, but in our case they don't. All right, we'll stop here, and God willing, we'll pick up the daf tonight at 5:30. We'll do the daf yomi tonight.